All right, running a few minutes late. It is Wednesday, February 26th. It's another beautiful day in paradise. It's 78 degrees in Austin, Texas. The winter is gone and we are on to summer already. So time to play golf and have a good time. We have a great guest today. The team is on. And before we get rolling, let's have our own John Sibley Butler play some music.
Bring us your tide and weak, and we will make you strong. Bring us your foreign songs, and we will sing along. Bring us your broken dreams. We'll give them time to mend. Is there not any love anymore? Living in the promised land. Living in the promised land. Our dreams are made of steel. The prayer of everyone to know how freedom feels. There is a lonely road across the shifting sand, room for everyone living in the promised land.
All right. Good job, Johnny.
Thank you,
You're
sir.
you're always with an incredible repertoire of songs. And NVIDIA results are key to a smoldering AI stock rally. There's a huge anticipation. The market has been shifting from NASDAQ to small stocks and high tech and AI everywhere. And there's a gazillion trade shows coming up in March, and everybody's talking AI and AI and AI. And you guys have seen the battle between ChatGPT and Gemini and Grok and DeepSeek, obviously. And it's kind of fascinating what's happening. And lots of new ideas about new things. Yesterday I was talking to my team about the Navier, the N30. I don't know if you guys have seen this, but it is by far the most beautiful boat that anybody could own.
It's electric, no doubt. It's no electric.
It's all electric, and it's just fascinating to me. You guys can see this, but it's using the foil technology to glide over the water, and it's just spectacular. It's called the N30, made by Navier. Look at that, gorgeous, just spectacular. Anyway, I won one. So Johnny, lots of stuff going on. You're recruiting for the CNBC's Disrupted 50, and lots of stuff going on in the fundraising mode. And I know we have been talking to a lot of interesting startups. So what's your take of what's going on? And we can dive with our guest later on his specialties, which is training people on steroids or changing education and learning.
The CNBC is going extremely well, and it shows you an indication of the future, of what enterprises might look like in the future. So it's always interesting, heavily software, heavily AI applied to everything for the new CNBC technologies. What's interesting also here is the winners and the losers of what's going on now. I have a dear friend who has a placement service in Florida, and now, in Atlanta, and his business has tripled in the last month. A placement service. Either people are seeking to be placed or looking for other jobs. I don't know if they came from the government or where. So, in all of these things, of course, everybody's looking now at the waste that's being done. I like what my distinguished colleague Luann King said. He said, well, the person who did all of this took months and months and months of planning, Elon Musk, to design the best batteries in the world, months and months of planning to design rockets, but took one day of no planning and took a machete to the government. So that's one of the quotations that I will use from now on. It's a great, great analogy about the relationship between what we do as humans and when we take a lot of time to do something, and when we do not take a lot of time to do stuff. Also, I've had a lot of phone calls, Andreas, about China. I take my hat off to China. I think they have lifted more people out of poverty in the last 50 years than any country. I'm not sure if it's going to last, but right now I'm tipping my hat off. I'm not going to take China and demonize them. I take my hat off to what they've done, and taking our industrial sector and moving from there to their own quote technologies. And they said, well, China copies and it goes to the market where everybody copies, whether it's Denmark, whether it's whoever, everybody's copies. So we'll have to see how that plays out. I know that the freedom element is going to be huge. About 34% of everybody trying to come through the southern border in America, in Texas, are Chinese. They're not from Judea, Honduras, and other southern countries. But they're Chinese. And the other thing is, I think that the war in Ukraine is over, and I think it's over because we have a president who does not like to lose. He does not want to be on the losing end of anything. I think he's the kind of guy who likes to be liked. I think he's the kind of guy who hate losing. So as he continues with his Tea Party approach, if you will, quote unquote, to the government, it's going to be interesting to see what happens in Europe. But I can tell you this: that war is over. Forget about it. It's over because uh, uh, the Honorable Trump does not like to lose in anything, whether it's playing cards, right? Because everything now is a deal. And if we think about America as a 501c benevolent organization, well, we would pay $10 billion just to have a presence. That might be the right thing to do, but everything is the deal now. Everything is, what did it cost us and how can we get our money back? So we've gone from a 501c theoretical approach, if you will, to a corporate approach, which says, okay, let's fire 800,000 people, but there's no stock market to go up like you would do in regular corporate world. But then if everybody knows that if there's waste to be cut out, and all 501c's would have waste without a doubt, but if you can cut enough waste out, then there'll be a lot more growth. There'll be a lot of growth. But the big watchword to me as I analyze this thing is everything the deal. There's no more, okay, let's be benevolent to this because we are a benevolent country. It is. What's the deal? What does America get out of it? And if we can't get our money back, why essentially that we do it? Now, on top of all of that, if that's not enough, it's been great days in Austin, Texas. Austin, Texas is booming. The state of Texas is booming. Companies are coming here from the People's Republic of California in big droves. And the question is, will we have enough electricity? So all in all, the world is very, very interesting. The uncertainty, Andreas, is everywhere. The uncertainty is with our partners, with Canada. Are we gonna make Canada, another state? The uncertainty is with Mexico. What are we gonna do with Mexico? The uncertainty is with China. China has become, in many eyes, not someone who was cooperating with us, but a competitor now. So there are lots of things to think about, lots of talk shows going on.
And the transformation of the educational system. So, Llewellyn, what say you?
I just got back from Washington, and I've never known it in all the 50 years I lived there, being so subdued. People are not so much waiting for the next shoe to fall as the next blow to fall, as this rampaging, uncontrolled presidency with the help of Elon Musk, who is even more uncontrolled, attacks the United States, attacks the government of the United States, attacks our foreign policy, throws our allies out, throws our friends under buses, and makes peace with people like Viktor Orban and Putin. What the devil will happen next? We fear a loss in science leadership, medical leadership, anything that involves scholarship, time, and money is being cut. 10 years from now, we will have ceded our primacy as a research nation, probably to China and possibly to parts of Europe. It is a tragic moment in American history and American life, and I'm very, very saddened.
Well, I'm glad you're not holding back on telling us how you feel. So I am more interested in getting the conversation to our guest today, which is in the business of workforce development and education and the future of education. So we're lucky to have David Wentworth, who is a VP of Talent Platform Evangelist at SchooX, one of those amazing companies that it's an overnight success in the making the last 10 years that a lot of people haven't heard about. And that's usually how great success happens. David, welcome to the program. You're muted.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate you having me here, and I'm happy to do it. I'm glad to talk to you guys. Some interesting perspectives coming in.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about your thoughts, and you're welcome to chime in and comment on anything
Sure.
these guys have said. But tell us about what are your thoughts and what's going on in education, workforce development, what's SchooX all about? What are the trends that you're seeing? A lot of people say that the trades are the future. That everybody should, that this obsession of going to get a bachelor's and getting a PhD is overrated, that you cannot get your money back, that we need more, education at all levels. And obviously you have corporate America trying to figure out how to teach their workforce the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. So educate us on what's happening.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to unpack there, right? So, I mean, so SchooX, we're a learning technology platform, right? And that's our job, is to help these companies do this development and learning in their organizations. I've been an industry analyst for 15 years prior to being at SchooX, watching how companies execute their learning strategies, what's technologies they use. So all these things that everyone's talking about right now are having a huge impact on this space, this corporate learning, because you go to the big macro thing with, the unsettling feeling of what's going on in the government. Well, that purviews down into organizations. Everyone's unsure what the future holds. What skills am I going to need? What are we going to have? So they worry about that as far as developing, their workforce. And I also see this in, I'm in a very human-focused element of the corporate world, right? Learning and development is very people-centric. And my company and others like mine that work in that space pride ourselves on being very people-centric. But what we're seeing is, a big shift away from DE&I initiatives, right? That were used to be so prevalent, and programs all built around that. As those start to go away, companies start to wonder, is there a next step on that slope where we don't need to be people-centric anymore, right? We don't really, we're being told we shouldn't care about diversity, equity, and inclusion. So maybe now we don't care if people even feel fulfilled or happy to be at work anymore, or if they feel like they're growing. Does that matter anymore? And I think it's a serious thing where they might be headed that way, right? And so huge impact in my world. And then, of course, John brought up at the beginning AI, and you mentioned AI. It's everywhere, right? That's having a huge impact on this. Do we need to reskill people because their jobs are going to go away because of AI, or do people need to upskill and use AI in the job that they do? I mean, what's the path forward? What's real? What's not? Because there's a lot of not real out there in the world of AI that people have to sift through. And you talk about things moving quickly. This is something that's moved far too fast for corporate America to keep up with. Like, they just don't. Most of the people that are making decisions about AI in their organization don't really even understand what it is and what it does. And I think that's a huge challenge. And then I think the last thing I want to address is, when you mentioned like, oh, what's the future of education? Does the bachelor's matter? What's the path? Are you going into trades? I personally feel like most of the people that are saying that have the education already. So it's easy to sit there and say, you don't need it. You can just go ahead and get a trade. I'm good with what I got. So I don't know how true that is. I think things are always changing. We're having some minor sort of industrial revolution. skills will have to change, but that's always been the case.
Yeah, yeah. John.
Oh yeah, well yeah, we had a lot of things. And let me just say that good riddance to DEI. I'm equal opportunity and affirmative action. And I think they got rid of affirmative action, equal opportunity, created DEI for white certified minorities that had no kind, and the issue became not what's your opportunity, but are you offended? So good riddance to the DEI. Let's bring back equal opportunity in America where everybody can compete. And I won't have to worry about if somebody calls me a Creole at work, when I can get sued if I call somebody Creole. So, so that's me. And I wrote an editorial in the Dallas Morning News entitled "How DEI is Killing Black Professors Like Me," and that's why I quit the University of Texas early, because the dean told me that we could not talk about the percentage of blacks because of affirmative action, but then turned right around and started talking about DEI and white Americans. And I stood up and said, "Hey, I'm out of here, but good luck." The other, and that's a fact. The other thing I want to ask David is about the whole education process. Now, David, I think where we are, let's think about this thing now. I'm gonna use me and I'll just do some admit. I'm a fourth generation college graduate. Grandmother's father was an MD. Every butler since 1900 has finished college. And we never associated college with a job. Never did. When I went to college, my father said, go to college, learn how to learn, join Kappa Alpha Psi, which was my college fraternity, join Kappa Alpha Psi, and learn how to do something. And in those days, David, General Motors would come hire the smartest people and make them engineers themselves. I mean, they didn't hire engineers right out of college. All our pilots from World War II, I mean, they learned. We had pilots who were immigrant, Italians flying airplanes. We had the Tuskegee Airmen flying airplanes. So my question to you is college for the upper class, and we're going to relegate all other Americans to trade schools? I mean, is it okay? When I went to college, the parents paid, and there were 5 of us. I had a brother went to Indiana, went to IU, I went to LSU, sisters went to Dillard. So where are we now? I mean, are we saying that, are we telling people that it is only the wealthy who should go to Harvard, Yale, Princeton, a major in Plan 2 at the University of Texas, major in liberal arts, and then we're going to put everybody else in trade schools? Tell me where you think we are. And you don't have to comment on my DEI.
That's all right.
Because I know that I'm right.
I don't know, but I mean, look, I don't think it's anybody's saying, other than the universities themselves, like, Harvard, Yale, if you want to use that list, that wealthy people are who go there. I mean, that's just, that's by definition, right? No one's, other than the university themselves, to sort of put that up there. But I don't think that's true. I don't think, other than the economics of it, which is forcing it to be, well, I can't afford to go to any of these schools, so I should go to trade. That's the issue. But as far as what you get out of it, I mean, I think you described this idea of not associating college with the job. I think there's a few very specific educational tracks that are associated. If you want to get into chemical engineering or something like, yes, that clearly is a pathway in education. Following a lot of folks, college is more of the experience and what you described, right? You go and you meet new people, you hear new things you never heard before. You learn how to exist.
How to learn. Play classic guitar.
You learn how to learn, which is a huge part of it. So I think all of that feeds into whatever career you may. I mean, I've talked to so many people about their careers, and nobody has this straight path of I did this, and it all followed. It's a big zigzag of what happens, where life takes you, where your opportunities are, what you're attracted to. And I think, whatever that college experience is, it's what you make of it. Yeah. Are there educations that people maybe invest in that don't, pay off? I'm sure that is true. But I also think that the experience overall, as a general concept, college education, I think, is hugely valuable. I mean, in my space, I know that companies have tried to think, well, it's a degree isn't important. And there's something to that, right? If I have a degree and I'm in my 50s now and I got my degree so long ago, does that matter what that degree is anymore? Right? So what have I done since then? So how do we attribute my experience and my skills that I've gained over those years in the same way that we would attribute a college degree? Right? How can you walk around with the thing that says, this is all the stuff that I did, here's everything I know? And that, I think, is a big challenge. So companies are trying to figure out how to do that. But as you said, GM would take people and they would make them engineers. Nobody's really doing that anymore. Companies are not educating people on that level. The corporate learning is more about skills gaps, right? Closing skills gaps so we can meet new needs. We're not going to make you anything. If we need software developers, you better be a software developer when we hire you, right? Now we can learn other aspects of that job while you're there, but we're not going to make you that thing. And so that doesn't happen, and I don't see that changing. And the other thing I would say is happening is maybe there's a gap between what you learn in the university academia world versus what's expected of you on a job. Like how to have a job, how to do those. I think there's a gap there, and it's falling more and more on corporations to fill that gap.
Right. What's interesting is that I'm a professor at UT for 40 plus years. And if you look at, let me just do family background. We have a plan too that we created in the 1950s to compete with the Harvards and the Yales and the so-called Ivy Leagues, and it's all like an Ivy League education. And this is where all the wealthy kids go. Right, and then you have the other the other ones that's kind of lined up with industry. But if you go to Ivy League, it really doesn't matter what you majored in. I mean, even the OJT that is starting as a company, right, and a company as a person that's doing books, and you can become accountant in a company, especially now with with all of the software. Hell, it's easy to become I mean, try being an accountant 50 years ago.
Right.
Versus now just learning a software program. So again, in terms of the overall structure, and if you look at where we need to be as a country, are we going to let people figure it out? Are we going to quote put people in a certain kind of trade schools, right? Versus those ones who go learn Locke, Beethoven, learn to play classic guitar, understand the importance of business history, and et cetera. Is there a movement toward the college being not important, especially for the average American? I don't see it in, I consider myself as a black bourgeoisie tribe where everybody goes to college, right? I don't see it in that tribe at all. Where did you see it? Who's behind it to say that college is not important? And by the way, you don't have to go to college. I mean, some of the wealthiest people, right, have never seen a college.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's as cut and dry as it's good or bad, right?
Okay.
It's so dynamic, and so many factors go into it. Whether you could see somebody has all the opportunity in the world and that gets access to the education and does absolutely nothing with it, and then you've people who have zero opportunity and manage to turn their lives into something amazing. So, everybody's a unique story. I don't think there's anybody behind this idea that you don't need college, other than it's becoming a less and less attainable goal for a lot of people. So
if you can't pay for it, you're in trouble.
Well, right. And a lot of people can't. And so most, I would say. And so then what's the alternative? How do we work in a system where then maybe it's not as important, right? So I think it's bending this idea that maybe college or a degree isn't important, is bending to this fact that more and more people, that experience is out of reach for them.
Right. Because America has been run by the Ivy League since the 1700s.
Mm-hmm.
And
Llewellyn?
What you have to say very much, David, particularly when you said the people who think other people should go to trade schools are people who themselves went to university. And that's very true. I'm a big believer in trade schools and the trades, and I've spent a little bit of time proselytizing a marvelous place in Charleston, South Carolina, which is a 4-year liberal arts college with a trade. It's called the College of the American Building Arts. And I'm more interested in the back end of it, which is that about 1 in 5 of the graduates within 5 years starts their own company. because they have a trade they can sell. They don't start it in sociology or history or journalism. They started in carpentry or plastering or ironwork, or which they have learned. But that's not a total solution. The real hidden issue here is deciding who goes where. At one time in Britain, they had a very arbitrary system called 11 plus, where they basically said, you're smart, you're going forward with education. You're not so smart, you're going to be a tradesman, and you're going to a different kind of school, and college is not a possibility. When I was a kid growing up in Africa, we didn't go to college. It simply wasn't a possibility. Very small number of very smart kids with wealthy parents sent them to college outside of the country. This was in Zimbabwe. But college was not a possibility, but there were still ways of sorting things out. And I think the critical point is, how do we draw that line without dooming people by drawing them and putting them on the wrong side of the line? I also think it's time the universities did something to meet reality and stop being ivory towers, Ivy League or otherwise, became a lot more efficient. Seems to me the amount of education they deliver for the amount of money they consume is disproportionate. I think if you want to see waste, fraud, and abuse, go over to your local large university. Anyway, I've lectured now at probably 40 universities, and the more prominent and famous they are, the greater the waste I see. Professors who don't teach, professors who are busy consulting, writing books, doing anything but the work for which they are paid. And at some of them, I'm thinking of places like the Ivy Leagues, actually, they're paid very well. Not all of them. I've been to universities where the faculty is very poorly paid, but that's the way it is. But you're doing critically important thinking as well as important work, David. I think some of your observations are extremely astute about how the workplace has changed. I also thought what you said about AI was very interesting, whether you should be training the workforce to be displaced by AI or to become more productive using AI. And a very interesting phenomenon, I've been reporting on AI really since about the last 10 years almost. But one of the most interesting things is the way that workers have adopted AI ahead of the places they work. So you get a large corporation which is sitting around the C-suite, should we, shouldn't we? Should we do this with AI? Whereas down there in the workforce, everybody is on AI to help them with their work, so that they've already adopted it ahead of their corporations and are becoming, at least enjoying their work or finding it easier, if not more productive. I was doing a webinar for one of the large law firms, Denton's, recently, and we had several AI people on, and they said this was a very real phenomenon where the workers have adopted AI way ahead of the institutions. And that's very, very interesting, and represents, as far as I know, a new dynamic in the workplace. Certainly one I have never observed, where the workforce is educating itself ahead of the institution in which it is employed. So I think your observations are very much on mark, and it's a very interesting and vital place to be. What do we do with the workers in the future? And I always worry about those who were equipped by nature with less skill. When I had a publishing company in Washington, I had a print shop that went with it. And there were people who worked in the print shop who couldn't do what the reporters did. They couldn't, and they weren't equipped, not because they were uneducated. They were or they weren't, but they simply didn't have the mental facility to do it. But they were wonderful people and very good at what they could do, and what they could do, they did very well. And those people are of great concern. they're also very hard to retrain. Very smart people can be retrained. People who are struggling to cope with work are not easily retrained and are more likely to drop out, become disillusioned, and become a social problem. And that's a large concern, I think. It certainly concerns me. But you're in the right place at the right time, doing the right thing, in my opinion.
So David, educate us a little bit more. You know, I'm remiss to bring back my favorite movie of all times, The Matrix, when Trinity needs to learn to fly the Huey, she calls Tank, and Tank downloads the program in 30 seconds, and now she's an expert. What is the dynamic of the skills gaps? And, you know, if I'm a company X, Y, and Z, maybe give us an example without saying a name, whatever you can share. You know, what are we talking about? 30 courses, 20 courses, you know, every quarter? What does the dynamic look like?
Yeah, that's the thing. The dynamic is the word, right? It's ever changing and it's always different. And there's no secret formula that you can create and say, okay, now every organization use this formula, because it's just everyone's after somewhat different things. And so I think the solution and what companies are finding success with isn't it has to be 20 courses a quarter, or whatever the content is. It's how do we have enough material and elements and interactions that we can be agile, and we can not only react to what's happening, but maybe do some proactive things. But it's all about that agility about business changes fast, right? The needs change. We saw, you know, something like the pandemic hadn't really been seen in recent history, and it's massive, the change and the shift and the different things that people had to do. And to any organizations that's now looking back at that, you know, 5 years in the rearview mirror, thinking, well, that nothing like that will ever happen again. That is crazy. It's like you have to be agile enough to be prepared for whatever it is. So there isn't necessarily a set amount of learning that's going to close the skills. I think the biggest challenge companies face is they don't know what skill. Two things: they don't know what skills they need, right? They don't, because they're not really sure. They're not able to see that far advance, but they actually don't even really know what skills they have. Most companies don't have a good handle on their skills inventory, what's available to me. And, you know, Luan, what you're talking about, this idea that, you know, people might struggle and what do we do? That is very true. And then I think in today's environment with the technology and some uses of AI and things, companies are having success using technology to help figure that out for people. You're able to uncover patterns, recognize things in people at work that says, you know what, you're not doing so great with this. Turns out, though, it looks like you have an affinity for this other thing, or you're showing some skills that maybe point you in this direction that you didn't realize, and we can actually take you that way. And so these things are coming up to the surface, whereas before managers didn't see it, couldn't recognize it. The worker themselves didn't know, weren't really sure. And now these things are starting to bubble up. And I think the key in that whole big thing with the difference in AI and Llewellyn, what you're talking about, the view of AI from the top versus the workforce. I think at the executive level, people are very much wrapped up in the news cycles and the things, the generative AI piece, the ChatGPT, the Grok, all of that. Whereas workforce is looking more at all of these legion of other tools that help them automate, that help them pass massive amounts of information quickly and understand what's going on where they couldn't do it before. And so that's why they're able to apply it and do it and use it. Whereas the organization as a whole is sort of paralyzed because they're afraid of the future holds, and we don't really understand this technology. So there is a divergence as to what AI we're talking about. Are we talking about automation? Are we talking about large language models? Are we talking about generative AI and, you know, actually creating things? You know, that's where I think there's a bit of disconnect.
I would like to jump in here and say that Johnny and I on this program previously have said that we've noticed how good, and he has much more experience than I do, the military is at finding the right person for the right job, or the right job for the right person. They become very skilled at it, more so maybe than the private sector is. So you make another excellent point.
Yeah, I do agree with that, because I have books on that. And I think that one thing about, there are two things. I think tasks are easier today than they were 40 years ago. I think that pilots flew airplanes years ago, and now they just babysit them. I think they flew helicopters years ago, and I'm proud to be a helicopter guy from Nam. And I think they just babysit them now. I think I can just let my car go and it'll drive and stop and go around and go around things, right? So my question is this. Let's go back and look at models of success. And I've been studying management and workforce for, for 40 years or so. And let's ask this question. Have technology taken away or has it replaced the basic, quote, intelligence that it needs to replace? Or will it ever replace? Is AI just a fast idiot? That's my first question. And if it's not just a fast idiot, what is the place of management in AI? So I was doing consulting for a major firm when email came out. And there's a big, wow, what's going to happen? Because all of a sudden, the CEO, the president of this huge company, international company, could communicate with people without at all interacting with mid-management. They did not need mid-management anymore. So my question is this, what is the model that you utilize for the best company now? Is it Apple? Is it Southwest Airlines? Is it American Airlines? What's the best model for management now? And what I really hear you saying, David, is that you really have to learn how to learn because things are changing so fast. Because I don't think the C-suite know anything about AI, not know how to manage it. But I can tell you this. I grew up writing papers on yellow paper, writing books on yellow paper and pen, right? And it's much easier now, right, for me to write a book now. It's much easier for me to do everything now, to be an accountant, I mean, I can write equations now, but just telling the AI, give me a regression equation. And here's the thing, is that progress? What does that mean for the workers themselves? Are they now like an airplane pilot who is now just a passenger? Are managers now just a passenger on AI, where they're just managing things and getting the desired outcome that they want?
Yeah, I mean it depends, because there's the skill set of how to am I skilled at leveraging those tools, right? These new tools. Like, look, since the dawn of technology, every technology that's ever come around has been told that it's going to save us time, right? We're going to have time. And if all of those time savings had been realized over the course of history, none of us all we would have is free time. That's all we'd be doing. And so all these tools that you're using, John, that make your life so much easier, like, those tasks are easier. But I mean, do you find yourself with just an overabundance of free time because you're using these tools, or are you just doing more things and doing different things?
Right.
And I think that's really the key, is like, how do we leverage these tools in a smart way? And, as far as management goes, I think there's a couple of things that happened. So I go back to the pandemic real quick, when everybody was like forced into remote work where it was possible. A lot of managers realized that, or a lot of companies realized that their managers, all they were doing was walking up and down hallways and poking heads in offices and over cubicle, because now you couldn't do that, right? You couldn't walk up behind somebody and go, hey, how's it going? And okay, so then what are you doing as a manager all of a sudden? What are you actually doing? So there was a big, I think, culling of that type of middle management. Now you're starting to see this management, that layer is the key to taking what the business needs and what it wants and translating that into what can we get out of our people? How do we get those results? What are the performance indicators we need? What does good look like? How do I get everybody behind this? And that's really what I think that management layer is all about now. So it is a different model. Who's the best model as an organization for me? I couldn't tell you. I mean,
Dave, let me give you an example of what I think, what I've studied. I had a former student at UT, started a company, very, very successful. And we were talking about this, and he said to me, look, I don't care what they do as long as the bottom line is there. They can be out on the boat. They could be playing golf. And I really don't need the managers themselves. If I hire the best people who are, self-rewarding, I really don't care what they do during the day. Everything is interconnected, and they could be anywhere. They could be at home, and this is a long time ago. And as long as the bottom line is there. So what's the relationship between the bottom line, or profit, if you will, and the different kinds of tools that we're utilizing? Is it true that when I switched from yellow paper to a Macintosh computer, did my efficiency go up? Is it true that when a company switches to AI, will it increase their bottom line? what's the relationship between the technologies that you use and the bottom line? Because remember, we're in business to provide a service, to make a profit, and on the way to please the people who work for us. It's not the opposite around. I gave a talk at Rice a month ago, and I was shocked at the new management professors who thought it was the job of, of the company, right? Not to make a profit necessarily, but to make sure that their lives were okay. So my question to you is, and you know what I'm talking about, my question is, hey, how does all of this affect the bottom line?
Yeah. Well, listen, as someone who works for a technology vendor, this is our life, right? This is what we do. And it's gone from just saying, years ago where a learning management system provider like us could come in and say, oh, here's what our tool does. It does these things, these tasks, these processes. It manages your learners. It assigns courses. Okay, that only matters to the learning and development leader, the trainers. It's much more now when we engage with companies, and this is all of the stuff that we do from my company is, here's how we've helped this company save X dollars. Here's how we've shortened the time to productivity for your new hires. It went from this to this. Here's how we've reduced the loss and waste in this restaurant because the training is better. And it goes on and on and on and on, because you can show how the tool gets people what they need to do their jobs better, right? The whole idea is better, faster, stronger. Our technology is the tool that helps you do that. Other HR technologies, maybe a slightly different angle depending on what section of HR. And then you go into the broader organization, any technology that's coming in the house has got to answer that question, right? You can't just come in and say, oh, we need this technology because it's really cool and it's got these neat colors and my kids like it. And this has to be here because it's going to do this thing, and this particular thing translates to this business outcome. We have to always tie it. So I think any technology that isn't able to articulate that isn't going to be around.
It's very interesting. I'd like to ask whether there are particular kinds of companies that are smarter in their attitude to their employees, and also what is your experience with unionized labor?
So look, I've seen, just from my experience, and I might be biased because I'm in a very people-centric industry, but the organizations that I've done research on, that I've talked to, that I work with, when they do make that investment in their people, the bottom line does get affected positively, right? And it's very clear. The things that they're doing on the surface at first blush might sound touchy-feely and, oh, that's nice, but it's not about that. It's literally about, when we do these things, when we take care of people in these ways, when we grow them, when we develop them, these business metrics are positively affected, and that's why we're going to do it. So I see that happening more and more. Like, even we do a lot of work with frontline, so like retail, restaurants. Considered typically, those frontline jobs are considered very transitory, bottom rung, in and out, quick turnover, very high order of industries, 60%, 100% in some, over 100% for some companies, meaning within a year, everybody has turned over in those frontline roles. But what they're finding is, like, instead of saying, well, it turns over so much, so let's not invest, let's not waste the time and money to develop these people, we just need to get them up and running and get them out. The companies are like, if we just give them a little extra of something, if we give them something, support them, they stay longer. Yeah, they may still transition out because of the nature of the job, but they're going to stay longer. They're going to do better while they're here. And then when they leave, they're a brand ambassador. They go on, they become hugely successful and say, well, I remember my time at X restaurant and they really helped me grow. They gave me this, they got me started. And companies are really finding that that's very important. Now, Llewellyn, specifically to your unionized environment, I can't say that I've had any direct interaction with, one versus the other. Most of the stuff that the companies we work with, very franchised, very disparate geographically. So not a lot of union, unless you get specifically into the restaurant industry. There are obviously quite a few different unions operating in there. I haven't noticed, from where I sit on a learning development standpoint, a huge difference, because from what we do, the companies aren't treating those workforces any differently, right? They're still trying to train everybody. They still need everyone to have the same skills, regardless of what the environment is.
Thank you.
I really
Mhm.
like that. You know, I studied commitment. And let me just ask you this question. And I'll just say I get academic in the research literature. It relates to the time invested that kids and people had in their company. So you say, you know, why won't you leave now? Because my retirement, I'm invested in that.
Mhm.
And that was the biggest variable. Now with the 401k and no retirement in sight, what does that do to commitment? I mean, what does it do? Because there was a time in America, that is, where people worked for companies and companies committed to them. It was a two-way kind of process, non-recursive process. I don't think we can say that now. I don't think that people commit to companies, and I don't think that companies commit to people. And I think, as you just said, as a result, there's a lot of switching around and there's a lot of movement around. So the idea that if you train somebody, for example, we're not having a University of Texas spring football game because we know that everybody will scout the team, right, doing spring training and then ask the best players to get on the portal. So why put them out there? So my question is, do you see less commitment to companies and less commitment of individuals to company? Or is everybody just getting in, getting what they want, and moving on with no retirement in sight?
Yeah, I think it's all of that is happening, but do you think you're right that the lack of that sort of end goal fiscal commitment, that being gone, that does have a huge effect, right? And so that's why companies have been trying to find other ways to create the kind of a culture that people feel like this is what I want to do, this is where I want to do it, and here's why. And it's all about almost everything I talk about from learning comes back to this thing, what's in it for me? And it's a phrase that we've heard, our whole lives, and it's often said with disdain, like how like it seems arrogant or selfish to ask what's in it for me. But the reality is everything we do in life, whether consciously or subconsciously, we're asking ourselves that question, right? So if an organization can answer that for people, like here's why that's important to you, obviously behind that was why it's important to the organization, right? But here's why it's important to you. The more that you can answer that question, the more you're going to get more of a commitment. But I think, listen, people realize the reality of the world. Companies probably for a lot longer than people were definitely not committed to their people, have not been. It's like, whatever, take it or leave it. Right. I think companies that have shifted that mindset a little bit are doing better holding on to people, but people have reacted to that. So you've seen in the generations, behind mine, even this idea that I'm going to work somewhere for 10 years. I'm going to work somewhere for 5 years. Like even that sounds like a stretch. I think people have just come into this reality that that doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Doesn't happen.
I
And
think,
so my career isn't a company. My career is me and where I go.
yeah, and the paradigm shift is that for years, Americans, we lived through institutions. That is, we worked for General Motors for 45 years. We worked for American Express for 45 years. We worked for the New York Times for 45 years. We lived through institutions. And the institutions that we work for might be just important as our religious institutions. They bring us a bit of stability in the world. So living through institution is called the institution approach. It means that there are certain kinds of barriers that individuals essentially look for. So what we're finding now at the end of the day, and I'm sure you agree with me, is that the pensions are not there. There are people who are 60 years old with no savings and no pensions. There are people my age with no savings and no pensions. But more important, the only thing like we've left in America is a gig economy where people skip around. Where's the stability? Uh, are we creating serfs? Let's look at it in another kind of way. Will we own something? Are we creating a country where the top half, they buy all, they live in houses, and then the upcoming generations, they're becoming serfs. They won't own anything, right? They have no relationship to anything. So therefore, if you look at what we call the workforce, to make the historical analysis, are we moving back to serfhood, where we have an elite that controls everything, who buys everything, has most of the wealth, is on the stock market, and then we have others who are out there working with no institutional support, and from a historical comparative point of view, we're back to serfhood, aren't we?
It definitely feels like that. I think, young people heading out into the world can't find an apartment to rent. I mean, let alone buy a house and own things like you could. That just doesn't exist. And then the companies who provide what things that you used to be able to buy, now that we've moved to much more technology heavy industries, you can't even buy anything anymore. Everything is leased to you, every software. I mean, you can get a car now. Even if you buy the car, they will lease the options in the car. Like your heated seats won't work unless you pay a monthly subscription, or the thing, like everything is becoming a subscription model. So it's almost becoming impossible to own anything, whether it's too expensive or it's just doesn't exist. Everything is on a subscription or lease model. So I don't know how that is sustainable. And this idea of institutional institutions, what are today's institutions? If you name like a huge company, an Apple, a Google, do you think starting today, people are going to work at those places for 10 years? I let alone 45. So I don't know what that holds. I think we're sort of.
You can do like me when I go to Target. I check out everything myself. I go through the self checkout. I check it out myself, and then I'm gonna give me a hot dog. And the employer says, "What are you doing here?" Well, I did everything myself. I came in the store. I got my, I got everything off the shelf, and I did self checkout.
Listen,
what the hell are you doing? I thought
I always pick out my favorite. I pick out my favorite lane in my local Publix, and I say that's the one where I'm going to bag groceries once this all goes down. So I know.
Well, see, these are interesting times because we have to solve it. We have to solve it for future generations, and the Butler solution is let's get back to pensions. Let's get back to how can you ask people to save? Because the biggest problem in America is just the haves and the have-nots. I mean, the growth in it is just tremendous. I mean, and the fact of the situation is, if we have generations who cannot buy houses, generations who cannot own stuff, then we're back to another kind of organization or an economic arrangement that lies deep in history. And from a scholarly point of view, mathematical point of view, you can model that. But then from a humanistic point of view, the question is, how do you change it? I mean, how do you change the whole idea that you should be able to, as we would say in America, live better than your parents did, at least a great percentage of the population. And so my question to you is, as you see all of the stuff, companies, how do you see people in that age category approaching it? Is it okay? Is something that's expected? They don't want to buy houses. They don't want to own stuff. They don't want to have what do you see?
I think honestly, it's a recognition of their reality. You can't force a new reality. You can't be a millennial or a Z and come in and be like, well, I want it to be this way. I wish it was. It's just not that way. So they're going to have to, an entire generation of people is going to have to make their way in this new reality that the generations ahead of them have no historical experience to pass on to them. They can't say, oh, well, here's how you navigate it, because you're talking to folks who, it had a 2 parents, 3 kids, 1 job, 2 cars, house, and a pension.
Well, let me give you a model.
It doesn't exist.
Yeah. I want to get Llewellyn's reaction to this. Llewellyn, in the great state of Texas here, there was a Muslim population who decided to buy acreage of land and create their own team, their own city, with all kind of retail houses, and that's the old model of immigrant enclaves, as we like to call it. That is, you might have an Irish enclave, you might have an Italian enclave, or whatever have you in Philadelphia. So they have decided to go out acres and acres of land to solve this problem and create their own town with houses and with religious institutions, and just build an entire town that's separate from the city of Dallas so that their future generations can own something. Llewellyn, what do you think about that, if I may ask you?
That approach, from that point of view, is quite dangerous. Historically, you had these enclaves because it was necessary. It was the only place you could get a house if you were Italian, or if you were Irish or Portuguese, whatever, or later African American. But the idea that you would have religious entities created within a country, essentially a country within a country, is very dangerous. Modern communications have enabled immigrant enclaves to survive with their allegiance to the countries of origin or the religion of origin, rather than to the country they're living in. I had an art director who worked for me who was Korean, and his mother, a very talented guy, by the way, But his mother spoke Korean, lived in a Korean enclave in Arlington, Virginia, had no need to learn English, listened to Korean, and spoke to her friends in Korea on the phone all the time. This was not healthy. This is not good. When traditionally immigrants came here with a one-way ticket, if you come here and you have your allegiance elsewhere, that's very damaging. Any sort of company town or religious town, as these people
Religious
are trying
town.
to establish, will not have the allegiance to the nation that is feeding them and protecting them, and that is an unhealthy situation.
Did you see that? Did you see it at Andreas? Did you see that in the paper this morning? Yeah. Well, I was thinking that you go and just buy and create a whole nother city.
Gentlemen, I have to go. I've got a hard stop. I've got to get on the next.
Oh yeah, we
Absolutely. I was going to ask David real quick. David, final thoughts. What's in front of SchooX or you for the next 90 days, 6 months?
Yeah, I mean, our focus is way smaller than this discussion today, right? I mean, we're just focused on trying to help organizations, grow their people and develop. And so we're we've rolled out a new user experience for the technology. So we're very excited about that. That's kind of our thing right now that we're focused on. Wish I could solve some of the things that we were talking about today, but not exactly in my purview.
Yeah.
Well, David, I love it. Just remember, the purpose of the firm is to create wealth, create jobs, maintain jobs, and if you love the people, that's a side benefit, right?
Well, I hope everybody goes in the chat and clicks on SchooX. John, take us away.
Thank you so much, Dave. Bye, guys.
There's just no one else around. Everybody's leaving town. Some gotta win, some gotta lose. Good time, Charlie's got the blues.
Woo.
Thank you.
Thank you, Johnny. David, all
Thank you,
the
David.
best. We'll stay in touch. Thank you.
Thank you,
We'll
David.
follow up.
Bye-bye.